Here I am, Lord, I come to do your will. Inulit-ulit natin sa ating responsorial song. Today, I invite you to focus our reflection on obedience. If obedience is about doing God's will, I suppose it is not even possible to obey without first of all knowing and understanding God's will. You know, the word obedience comes from two Latin words, ob and AUDIRE. Ob meaning in the direction of. AUDIRE is to listen, meaning to listen in the direction of or to direct one's attention to the call, to be ready to respond to it. And that's the kind of image that I get in today's gospel about the servant who awaits his master's return and ready all the time to open the door when the master returns and knocks. The term that actually comes close to the original meaning of obedience is attentiveness. Attentiveness to a calling or a vocation. Well, actually, pareho lang yung dalawang salita na yon. Vocation is Latin for calling. We have only one life to live. Of course, we want to know what we are called to do. In English, when your name is called in a roll call, di ba ang sagot? Present. In Latin, ang sagot ay ad sum. And you know, literally, ad sum in Latin means, here I am, or I am at your disposal. The prophet Samuel was supposed to have heard God's call very early in his life. Bata pa lang siya. He was a young boy serving the old priest Eli. We hear about it in the first book of Samuel, chapter 3. And there in that chapter, we're told that the young boy Samuel daw kept waking up in the middle of the night and presenting himself to the old priest, saying, "Here I am, you called me." But the old priest kept answering to him, "No, my boy, I did not call you. Go back to sleep." But it happened again and again. And it was not until the third time that the old priest began to think that maybe it was God calling this boy. And so he said to the boy, "Okay, the next time you hear the voice again, ganito sabihin mo, 'Speak, Lord, your servant is listening.'" And that was how the prophetic career of the prophet Samuel began. Attentive listening is what is most essential in obedience. Listening to what God has to say. And God, you know, has His unique ways of getting us to know and to understand His will before we can respond with obedience. The problem is sometimes we fail in our discernment. And sometimes we ascribe to God what is not from God. Maybe this should serve as a good spiritual test for the people who are now presenting themselves as candidates for the coming elections in May of 2022. In the Bible, even ancient kings often consulted the prophets to know God's will so that they would be able to obey it. And imagine how embarrassing it would be to be so convinced that you are being called by God to run for this or that office, only to be told prophetically, "Go back to sleep. You must be dreaming. God did not call you. Matulog ka na. Pantasya mo lang yan. The late Swedish UN Secretary General, Dag Hammarskjöld, left a diary which revealed what a deeply spiritual person this man was. And his reflections in this diary made people understand why he was such a strong-willed man in the advocacy for peace. Take note, he also received the Nobel Prize for Peace. Doon sa kanyang diary, he wrote these lines. Among the most famous lines from Dag Hammarskjöld, sabi niya, I do not know who or what put the question. I do not know when it was put. I don't even remember answering. But at some point, I did answer yes to someone or something. And from that hour, I was certain that existence is meaningful and that therefore my life in self-surrender had a goal. Of course, he wrote it in Swedish. Remember how I used to react to that expression, surrender to God's will? Whenever we speak about obedience, ang reaction ko, parang napaka-defeatist. Because I know it's people who get defeated who are surrendered. No choice, baga. I have a feeling that the original Swedish text that Hammarskjöld really meant was not surrender but self-offering or self-oblation. There is a poem by David Harris entitled, Who is Calling You? And I have a feeling that he read this UN Secretary General, his journal. And by the way, that Secretary General died in a plane accident. I'm sure he read the lines from Dag Hammarskjöld. Listen to the poem. It comes close to what the UN Secretary General said. Deep within the silence, we hear our name called. We never know what for, only that we are summoned. Summoned for something we must do, whether it be for love or whether it be to love someone or to give a little care. It could be that a life someone needs to share. So when from within the silence, someone calls your name, you never, ever hesitate. You answer it just the same. You answer because you never know who is calling you.